Hello and welcome to DF Direct, episode 70. We got past 69, it was super nice, and now we are back. The DF skeleton crew is here. Joining me this week, it's Tom.
Hello.
And Oliver.
Hi.
Nice, guys. We did it. We did the intro. That is the first of many hurdles that we need to surpass on this, a week where John, Rich, and Alex are all having a nice time or very sick, and we'll get everyone in the audience to guess who is what. But actually, it's Alex is down with the COVID, unfortunately, and John and Rich are enjoying some holiday. So it's down to us to cover the news. First of all, it's Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Is it too much for Xbox? Tom, what do you think?
Yeah, this was kind of a priority on our list this week because Oliver and I were looking at it thinking, what is this headline? It's so strange. Like it's kind of, because when you say the word exclusive to PS5, it immediately conjures up this idea that it's a platform exclusive, in terms of Sony versus Microsoft. But what it's actually saying, the point of the interview in the article, is that it's a PS5 developed game. It's not made for PS4. And so Rebirth is being made specifically for that platform to take advantage of those features on PS5. And it's not to say what can or cannot be done with an Xbox Series X, for example. But as we know, it is for now an exclusive to PS5. As far as I know, it's going to be on that platform for the foreseeable. And so yeah, it was okay. So on the one hand, a slightly odd headline in some cases, but it is an interesting story because it just shows that the time for cross-gen development on the is sort of subsiding, and we have a game here which is finally pushing forward and taking advantage of. Well, one of the things that's cited in the interview is the SSD speeds, which is it's a big deal, and it sounds like if you know Final Fantasy VII and you know the general structure of it, we're getting a trilogy out of this thing. The first game remake, FF7 remake, was intended to be the Midgar arc, and now we're moving to the outer world, or so we're going to assume at this point. And that might mean a different priority for the way the visuals present. And I think having next-gen hardware put to good use here is probably a good thing. I don't know. What do you reckon, Oliver?
Yeah, so I thought this was a funny story because the way some outlets were presenting it, I don't think intentionally, but they were basically saying, here is the reason why FF7 is a PS5 exclusive. I think people kind of jumped out of their seats in that one. And of course, the console wars, they start when people say things like that. What can you say? But I actually have a rough transcript. And basically the question was like, Final Fantasy VII Remake was supposed to be PS5 from the beginning, unlike the earlier entry. And then he goes on to explain, it's the SSD is giving us a lot more flexibility. It's giving us this vast open world. And if you remember Final Fantasy VII Remake on PS4, and of course the Intergrade versions, which were based obviously on that version, I think, Tom, you covered it back in the day, and it has like that kind of classic 8th gen corridor syndrome, where you're going from area to area and going through enclosed spaces, and you're kind of shimmying sideways. And everything, and it's a fixed perspective camera, so everything behind you is getting unloaded and everything in front of you is loading in. That's all over.
Classic.
Yeah, and there really aren't any open spaces. I think that game has a very good pacing and all that stuff. I'm not complaining, but it is a pretty limited title. Not even just in terms of the world construction, but also in terms of the asset loading and quality of the assets and things like that. So definitely, given their tech, it's a huge boon, I'm sure, to move over to PS5 for that title. And then there are a couple other technical details that I pulled out of the interview as well outside of the scope. Like Nomura said that the character models for the principal cast are the same as they were in the remake, which sort of suggests to me, along with the trailer that we saw last month, that probably it's outside of a few things that we saw, like I think there was touch bending on the foliage that you can just see briefly. I think this is probably more of an evolution from what we can see of the tech that was in the Final Fantasy VII Remake, which isn't obviously a bad thing because that was a tremendous looking title, but that's sort of the direction they're going with it. And of course, it's out reasonably soon. So
Yeah, got a couple of thoughts on this because is it a fair question to say FF7 Rebirth couldn't have been achieved on PS4? I mean, I'd say it's probable that you could push it, but it's just how much compromise are you willing to take? We've seen games like The Witcher 3 do big lush environments. You've got like GTAs and Red Deads and, enough proof to show that it can do, but you're also tethering your development to these limited Jaguar CPUs. And also more than that, you're splitting your development focus between two platforms again, which is, so it's quite exciting to see this is just a dedicated, focused project on one, and we might see a bit of like that proper next-gen potential coming out. But also, when it came to what happened with the PS4 upgrade, the PS5 upgrade of the remake, the original FF7 remake, the upgrades were there. I mean, I did the video, but it was not revolutionary all the time. 60 FPS was awesome. It took a resolution hit to do that, and 4K obviously in the 30 FPS mode was incredible. But it's fundamentally the game was still kind of intact. There were some lighting tweaks and that sort of thing, but nothing crazy. So this time we're going to hopefully see more.
Yeah, I definitely think a game of this scope is definitely achievable on PS4 because we've seen it in countless titles, like Tom said. The question is more just like, I guess, number one, is their tool set and their use of UE4, is that kind of up to the task given the extremely high level of asset fidelity they were aiming for with FF7? Maybe they didn't achieve it in all cases, but like in the, if they get environments up to the level that the character models were at, for instance, in FF7, that would be a pretty extraordinary thing. And certainly from what we've seen in the footage, unfortunately, we only have like a low bitrate 1080p asset, as far as I know, of that FF7 Rebirth trailer, but it does look very impressive. They are pulling off some really large environments. Does look like very high quality assets everywhere. Definitely that's the kind of thing that you could not achieve on PS4. You could achieve a version of it on PS4, I think, but I don't think they could have achieved that on PlayStation 4.
Yeah, I think it's really exciting that we're kind of now getting to the stage where next gen is really starting to take hold, and developers are starting to think, we could do this, we could technically do it, but it's just better that we get our vision like 100% as we want it on, a platform that's well suited for it.
Yeah, it says a lot that we're still referring to it as next gen because it does feel it's still not quite there. We're still sort of getting around to it. We're still turning the corner into it. It's been the most protracted cross-gen period I've known, and there's been quite a few now. So, yeah.
So, up next, Red Dead 2. We learned this week that the current gen ports, which were apparently planned, have been dropped, and development on Red Dead Online has been dropped to a pretty minimal level, it looks like. There might be new events and new things, but they're not really developing anything novel in terms of game modes or features, assets, that kind of thing. And I mean, for me, this is kind of understandable. We've seen this for a long time, that there haven't really been any substantive updates to Red Dead Online. My brother is a really big fan of this game, and basically every time he's over here, he's like, "Oh, can I check Red Dead Online? Is there anything happening?" And every time it's like, there's like 50% off on corsets. Sorry, that's it. That's your lot. So, I mean, I guess it kind of makes sense. It's good for players like him to say, okay, actually, there isn't going to be anything, so we don't have to worry about it. We don't have to wonder about it. We know everything is now going on to GTA 6, which makes sense. Oliver, are you surprised that they didn't make PS5 and Series X versions of Red Dead 2?
I am a little bit surprised. I guess they didn't announce it. I sort of presumed there was some project in the works, especially considering their very good work, I thought, on the current gen versions of GTA 5. And that's obviously an older project built on an older Rage engine. But yeah, it's a little weird because Red Dead Redemption 2 sold extremely well. And I guess Red Dead Online didn't light the world on fire, which is why they're presumably canceling active development on big new content. But Red Dead Redemption 2, it's a recent title. It's PS4 Pro enhanced, well, sort of with that broken 4K checkerboard. And it has a beautiful Xbox One X version, and it just feels like, deliver something like the One X version at 60 FPS, that'd be a very good-looking game. I don't think it would have to be a gigantic effort. I certainly hope that none of the negative reception of the Grand Theft Auto trilogy has affected any of these projects, or the also rumored GTA 4 and Red Dead Redemption 1 remakes/remasters, because I imagine these would be very different projects. But yeah, it's a little weird, because you'd expect these would be the kinds of titles that would really translate very well. I mean, it seems like a sort of game you just need to scale up to a higher frame rate target, higher resolution target potentially, and get it out the door. I don't even think it really needs ray tracing. I mean, they already have the beautiful variable penumbra shadows, and I mean, Red Dead Redemption 2 is still one of the best looking games on consoles for sure. So I don't think they need to do that much work.
I definitely agree. It feels like, from a money standpoint, there's a lot to be earned from just even putting out like a new box copy with a couple of optimizations, just a few tweaks. Or maybe that's speaking to the fact it could be just done in an update, and maybe there's a bit of a semantic element to this, in that they may not release it as a box edition, but there may be like a PS5 upgrade or a Series X upgrade, or smart delivery might cover it in the future. Because I remember the overwhelming reaction to, and this was ours as well, to the GTA 5 PS5 Series X re-releases was, you're paying for those, but the actual content was not enough to match the price. It wasn't really a fair deal. So it's possible that's a factor, and that they want to get it right this time and just say, hey, here's a PS5 update, it's free, or it's a nominal fee to make this happen, and you can get, like, I don't know if we can get 60 FPS out of this game. It's quite a, even though it's a last gen release, it's still one heck of a technical milestone, but we can get some flourishes out of the game for sure. That might be worth them pursuing. But yeah, it's kind of all I've got to say on that one. It's odd, is all I'll say. It's just strange that there's nothing forthcoming. So, like you, Oliver, I really did assume we were getting it.
I mean, I think that, a lot of us kind of expected that we would even continue to see GTA 5 releases for future consoles.
Yeah.
Like, if there was a Switch 2, like, where's GTA 5? I want to play GTA 5 on my new whatever. So, yeah, maybe this is a break from that strategy, or, maybe GTA 6 is just such an all-encompassing game that they really just need everyone that they have on it. Also this week, Skate 4, or previously known as Skate 4, and actually just Skate, was announced that it was going to be free to play. And there was also an interesting message about the 2021 build that was leaked. Do you want to handle that, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, it's a straightforward one, this. A leak went out. It's an early build. EA has a statement out, a very honest, straightforward one, saying, don't download it. It's not going to be, up to the power of what we're actually going to release. And steer clear of that. And I kind of have to agree. It's always like being told not to grab the cookie jar that's on the top shelf when you hear about something that you're not supposed to have. But in this case, I can definitely see, like, it's worth waiting, and especially given it sounds like a huge project, a lot of work's going into it. It probably. And playing an early build, as is often the case with, we play a lot of early stuff in this line of work. And I've been in QA, working at a company before this, Digital Foundry. It's not always flattering to see a game before it's ready, and you want your first impression to be the best it can be. So, yeah, I'd definitely say to wait on this one. But it's interesting that it's coming along quite fast. Free to play too. I'm not always keen on free to play, but I guess for Skate it makes a lot of sense. The sort of game it is, you can roam this big world and upgrade parts of it by spending, I don't know, money on it. But
I think it makes sense because in Skate there's a very obvious path to just having cosmetic changes that cost real money, and that can support the game for everyone that wants to play it, right?
Yeah.
So, it's not going to be something like Diablo Immortal where, you need to pay money to get, hopefully, this isn't the case, that you can pay money to get better stats or better equipment or better whatever.
Yeah.
It's just about how your character looks. I think that's fair enough.
Cosmetics.
Like some people will want to have, skate brands or whatever else that they represent or like in real life in their, to be represented on their character. And that seems pretty good. But I mean, I think the problem is that, a lot of the time free to play is associated with a product that isn't as high quality, isn't as polished as you would expect from a $60 or £60 release.
That's it. Yeah.
Hopefully, it'll be good.
I guess to go to the question of leaked builds, the point of leaked builds. Do you remember any leaked games that were kind of famous for their leaked appearances? The only one I can think of, the most famous one, is the Half-Life 2 leak way back, and it was nothing like the final game. And it ended up actually encouraging Valve to rebuild the whole thing and make it way better.
Yeah, I think the one that sticks out for me, and this is a bit more recent, is the GoldenEye 007 Xbox Live Arcade or 360 build that got leaked. I think it was 2 years ago, I want to say. And I remember John played quite a bit of that on the channel, and it looked very good, very complete. Couple issues, presumably caught up in rights stuff, but looked very, very good. And that was just fully almost ready build as far as I'm aware.
It's bizarre, isn't it? That sometimes it can go either way. Sometimes a game is absolutely ready to ship, and it's just sat in some archive in a developer's HQ.
Moving swiftly on, it's Bayonetta time. So there was an extended trailer released this week and a release date, which is this year, surprisingly. So what do you guys think about Bayonetta 3?
I thought the trailer looked really cool. It's very much a progression from what we saw in prior Bayonetta titles. I mean, there's some really cool gameplay sequences in there, like we see Bayonetta riding a giant crab, even a giant enemy crab, if you will.
Yeah.
There's a train with guns, rail shooter sequences. It seems like there's a bit of a more sci-fi tinge to it. Like some of the art reminded me a bit of Vanquish, Platinum Games' 2010 kind of action shooter game. It looked very reminiscent of that. Tech-wise, to me, it looked very similar to Bayonetta 2. There's some aliasing. I think maybe they're using a post-process AA. It looks very much... It has a bit of a 7th gen look to it. Not that that's a bad thing, but on the plus side, performance did seem very good to my eyes. I mean, obviously I didn't frame rate count it or anything, but it did look pretty smooth. It did look like a reasonably consistent 60 FPS, at least what they've shown so far. So those are big plus points for sure.
It's I definitely agree. It's the aesthetic of the 7th gen. It's very sort of I mean, maybe that's to its credit. Like, it's to its benefit that you have a consistency of style, and I don't think I was expecting that much more from Switch. If we're targeting 60 FPS from this game, it's got to, draw the line in the sand on visual quality and have 720p, 900p, or DRS even, to make sure it can hit that. I haven't pixel counted this one either, but it's 60 FPS is at the core of what makes this series work, and so whatever it takes basically to make that happen is good in my book. I guess this has been delayed so long. It's been 5 years since it was announced, I believe, and so there's a kind of internal build-up of hype in everyone's minds, especially I know several people have been so excited for this game, and so to finally see it is like, well, there it is. There's Bayonetta. I don't know what I expected, but that is exactly, kind of par for course with what Switch will deliver on that. I don't think we can expect much more from it.
So when I saw the trailer, I was kind of reminded of John's 1080p dream sequence for the PlayStation 3, where he's kind of looking at each of those games that were coming out and scoring them out of 1080p, of course. And, I think a lot of the time to hit that, they needed to really keep their, development goals very straightforward and not try and hit like a moving target in terms of, we need all these features, but also we need 60 FPS, and also we need it to be high resolution. Like a lot of the most successful games so far, that have been revealed in John's series, is ones that had a very clear goal in mind of saying, all right, 60 FPS is what we want, and if we want 1080p, we're just going to have very stripped back visual features to make sure that we actually attain that. And I think in Bayonetta, it is kind of like an action game, right? Like it does matter a lot to have consistency in frame rate, and and having that 60 FPS rather than 30 will make a huge difference. So I think given that constraint, I think what we've seen looks like they're right on target, which is super exciting. And I was also very chuffed to see that there was kind of you can play this in public mode being added to this game.
Yeah.
Because the one thing that kind of put me off before about Bayonetta was that it looks amazing. It looks super fun. And everyone that's played it always tells me, oh yeah, you should really check it out. It's really good. But there are just bits in it where I feel like if I was playing this on my TV at home and somebody walked in, they would say, what the heck are you playing? And I don't know if I can deal with those kind of questions. What do you think, John?
I agree. I played the original Bayonetta and a little bit of 2. But even playing the original was like, whoa, actually, I'm not comfortable. Like, if someone was to walk in right now, this looks a bit odd. But the problem was the game was just too good not to play. So that was the era of Platinum Games' Vanquish, as Oliver mentioned, and Bayonetta coming out, and you had to play those two. Those were just instant classics, and it was a lot of fun as well. It's very silly, but yeah, in the wrong eyes, this is a strange game to be playing on the big TV. So Switch is a good fit for it, I think.
Yeah. Well, you have the no nudity mode or the censored mode, or are they're calling that the naive angel mode, if I'm remembering correctly. But yeah, actually following up on a couple threads. So if you remember, Bayonetta 1 ran horrifically on PS3. 360 It was sketchy. Bayo 2 on Wii U and Bayo 1 on Wii U were better, but still sketchy. It really took, like, the Switch versions were pretty good of Bayo 1 and Bayo 2. Not perfect, but in docked mode where there's 720p, mostly 60 FPS there. So this looks more in that lineage than the earlier titles. And then my only other thought, given that release dates are on the mind, and this is coming out on October 28th, I believe, is that kind of early on in the year, or a couple months ago, it became pretty clear that the release schedule for this winter was looking pretty barren. And I know that we were a little bit concerned slightly about that, and concerned that maybe the software was getting all pushed to 2023. But now it seems a little bit more evident that some of that software that we were a little bit nervous about not materializing, it has now just been announced. Like, people were maybe trying to find gaps in the schedule. Obviously, we had the God of War release date announcement last week, and now we have the Bayonetta 2 release date announcement. And then also, I don't know, a couple days ago, there was the Diofeld Chronicle, which is the Square Enix tactics style turn-based game, which looks pretty cool. That's out on the 22nd of September. We have The Last of Us Part 1 on the 2nd of September. Like, lots of releases kind of coming pretty fast and quick in September, October, November. So I think it's shaping up to be a better year for games than I certainly thought a couple months ago, for sure.
Yeah, that the way it started was incredible. With Elden Ring, Oli World, just so many games. Just like Gran Turismo 7, it was like what's going on with 2022? But then it just dropped off a cliff. And I think what can happen is they'll see many publishers will see what we're seeing, a barren stretch besides FIFA and Call of Duty as the big tentpole releases, Modern Warfare 2. And so we'll rearrange their schedule accordingly if there are games ready to ship. So we are getting some of those games kind of dotted around, and they're not, it's good to see from our angle. Like one of the ones recently was, of course, Forspoken. Quite recently got pushed to 2023, and that's a bit of a shame to see. But we do have another Square Enix title in Diofeld Chronicles, at least. So
yeah, it's shaping up to be a really good year. So I'm excited. Another thing that's been on the docket is an Arc report for Switch. So this was kind of famous on the DF channel for being maybe one of the worst examples of a port, unfortunately. Very inconsistent performance, and Oh, yeah, it was just not a great experience for anyone, not for us reviewing it, and not for people playing it, unfortunately. But now it looks like someone, Grove Street Games, it says here, are reporting it, and it looks a lot more promising, which is great. What do you think, Tom?
Hard to 100% tell from off-screen footage of a portable screen. I will say that much up front. And obviously, early build as well. You can only jump to so many conclusions, but the outlook is quite positive, I'd say, even judging from this. The way it presents, it looks cleaner than I remember the original Arc release being. And, they were using really sub 480p, very like heavy temporal anti-aliasing, or just to sort of mesh together the frames, and just the results. It defeated the purpose of the ports to have it present so in such a blurry fashion that you couldn't see so far into the distance. The shadow maps were curtailed. It just looked. It didn't look like a game you really wanted to play. And the principle of a Switch port, impossible ports to Switch, is that, okay, you've got it running, sure, that's great, but it has to be enjoyable as well. And we've seen several compromises, ways to get that balance right. Witcher 3, it's a touch soft, but it still maintains a lot of the adventure, and there's ways to port your save over to PC, so there's a real reason to exist for that. And then there's the other end of the spectrum with Sniper Elite 4 and Zombie Army 4, which I covered recently. And the developers there, Rebellion North, were saying we want to hit 1080p as often as we can because that's important to us. And so there's a real difference in ethos between the likes of those developers and what was going on with Arc, which was basically get it running, and it's almost the rest is a secondary issue. So now we've got a game which actually looks really, really good. It's certainly a big jump up. There's a lot of detail being rendered to the far distance. It looks like there's less pop-in than I recall, and it's a lot more of a refined product, even in what appears to be a very early build. So quite excited for this one. Should be interesting to revisit.
Yeah, no, I mean, the original Arc Survival Evolved, it was such a cutback Switch conversion. And I think the thing that stood out to me at the time, watching the coverage, was just how low resolution it went, especially in portable mode. Like, I mean, I just checked John's coverage, and I think he earmarked the lowest resolution he saw in portable mode was 304 by 170, which is unbelievably low.
Christ. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it was just a blurry, smeary mess, like N64 level image quality for sure, if not worse. God, it was horrible. And this looks a lot better. I mean, it does look a little soft. Again, it's off-screen footage, like Tom mentioned, so it's hard to tell. But just scrolling through it, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if this is in SD class territory in terms of the image, which is or maybe even above, who knows. But the incidental details there, the draw-in would be quite not great if it was a console title, home console title. But on the portable mode here, it looks like draw-in's quite good. There's lots of incidental detail, lots of foliage. Frame rate is very reasonable. Overall, it does look like a much more solid conversion, and it's also interesting that it's coming from Grove Street Games, who perhaps fairly or unfairly maybe don't have the best reputation at this point. But I mean, it does look like a very solid Switch conversion, which is definitely interesting. I'm going to be curious to see how it pans out.
Yeah.
I think the important thing to remember as well is that, although GTA Definitive Edition didn't launch in the best state, it has actually gotten a lot better, since then. And obviously, maybe it was just a question of they needed to get it out the door at a certain time and probably were well aware of its shortcomings. So hopefully if they have a bit more time on this and they don't have as, tight of a release schedule, then they can do a really good job. And it looks like already it's quite promising. So yeah, it'll be really interesting to take another look at that one and see how it shapes up. So the next news item is a little interesting. It's the Matrix Awakens demo, which we absolutely loved when it came out. It was released on, PS5, Series X, I think Series S as well. And it just kind of showed for the, one of the first times what kind of the next gen could really look like. But unfortunately, if you haven't already downloaded it on PlayStation or Xbox, it is now delisted and you can now no longer get it. However, it still exists on PC where you can still freely download it. So it's a bit of an interesting situation, right? Because, this wasn't released that long ago, but already it's been delisted, and we can only kind of guess as to the reasons for this. Oliver, what do you think?
Yeah, so just a quick point of clarification. You can download part of the demo on PC. You can download the city sample section on PC. So not that initial playthrough, sort of like the really cool cinematic stuff with the chase that uses all of the Matrix IP and assets. You cannot download that on PC, but you can download and compile yourself the city sample if you have the skills. You can do that. Right. But yeah, it feels really weird to me because presumably Epic, I mean, that demo is so extremely impressive. I was just playing it a couple hours ago. It's incredibly impressive. It's just such a technical barnstormer. It's definitely the best looking thing you can play on consoles right now, if not, one of the best looking examples of real time rendering, bar none. And it's a little weird because presumably they knew they were going to be working with this IP. And they understood that there was a time exclusivity component to being able to work with those assets, that IP, those actors. They were not going to be able to hold on to that license for whatever reason for very long. And it's sort of interesting too, because you'd expect that maybe Warner Brothers, I think it's a good promotional product. I don't know why it needs to be pulled necessarily, why that serves anyone's interests, but it's a little weird. If I was in Epic's position, maybe you work with a different film franchise in that position, because it's totally bizarre and very weird that now you have to tell people, if you have a current gen console, like if your friend buys a PlayStation 5 or a Series X or Series S, I'd always say the first thing you got to do is you got to download the Unreal UE5 Matrix demo. And now what am I going to say? I'm going to say, well, there is a great piece of software. It was free and it was great, but you can't have it anymore. It's just weird.
Yeah. Now you have to say, let me download that for you. Let me just sign in real quick.
But you can still download it. You can still re-download it. It's not like PT. It's not fully removed. Yeah. It's just delisted. Like if you search in the store, it's not there. Even if you own it, or even if you already downloaded it, you have to go into your purchase section and re-download it from there. It's not on the store. So it's delisted, but not removed, if there is a difference, if you understand that,
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're not going to get into a situation where people are selling their consoles on eBay and saying, it's got the Matrix Awakens demo. It's really worth it. You better buy this one.
Not yet.
Bit odd, though, isn't it? The amount of work that must have gone into that how long has it been since there was a Matrix Resurrections maybe three months ago? How long? It's not a long stretch to kind of squeeze the worth out of that demo. I'm guessing it's a deal between Unreal and Warner Brothers over that IP that just had a finite cooldown, and very much the highlight of my PS5 owning a year, pretty much. I haven't had much that's impressed me on that level, and it was awesome just to have this little taste, a little bite of something that really showed me where we were going. And we at DF, we definitely made the most of it. We really wanted to cover that game and cover the demo and see it as where things could lead. To me it was always like this the sign of if they made a Spider-Man game for next gen, this is how it would look. This is a new Batman game. This is how it would look in a big city. So a big shame, but at least if you have already kind of taken it from the store, you can re-download it. So it's not a calamity.
So the final bit of news this week is that RTX 30 series graphics cards, or at least some of them, are getting a price drop. So obviously we know that the next generation of NVIDIA graphics cards and quite possibly AMD graphics cards are coming pretty soon. And so the RTX 3080, the 12 gigabyte model, and the models above it in the stack, so the 3080 Ti and the 3090 and the 3090 Ti have all gotten price drops. It seems to be in the US and the UK, presumably globally. I got a tip off from an Asus PR manager who said, our cards are going down in price. But it does look to be something that's affecting multiple GPU manufacturers. And I think this is, a fairly obvious, decision to make sure that the top end cards remain attractive for people in the run up to the new generation, because I think there's an argument to say that if you are already, if you have the money to get a high end card, you're probably better off waiting for the next generation, because it's likely that those cards will offer a lot more performance, maybe also a lot more power draw, but we'll see. And I think this ties into a question we received from a reader, Vassal Baran, who said, should you go for a current gen GPU while the price is somewhat acceptable, or wait for a possibly delayed next gen GPU sometime in Q4 or Q1? We don't know the dates yet, but I think, if you are considering a GPU purchase at the moment, I think it only really makes sense if you're considering a lower tier card, so something like a 3050 Ti, a 3060, because those lower end cards do take longer to come out in the release schedule. Typically you see kind of the flagship and then the mid-range cards first, and then it's months later that you tend to get the more affordable options. So if you're considering a low end option, just get it now, because the prices are already pretty reasonable. And even with these price cuts, I'd say it's still a little bit more shaky as to whether you should get a high end option right now. One interesting thing is that the RTX 3080 12 gig, which is very slightly faster than the 10 gigabyte model, is now cheaper than the 10 gigabyte model because of this price drop only affected this model and above. So there's an argument to be made to get the 12 gig model. I think the 3080 remains a very strong card, but yeah, with next gen coming, it's a difficult question for sure.
So I think there are two kind of things I'd bounce off on this. The first thing is that price scaling on the kind of towards the low end to mid range, I think Will would probably agree, has not been very good over the generations in terms of hitting your kind of price performance marks. Like, I mean, I remember back in 2013, I think at one point it was pretty easy to get like a 7850 for like 110, 120 bucks. And I think that doesn't compare that unfavorably to the price performance in that segment today. Like in these lower end segments, the price performance is not really taken off in the same way that it has in the higher end segments, perhaps because of higher fixed costs or whatever the reason is. So I suspect that, towards the lower end of the line, you really are not going to see big improvements in price performance, especially initially when the line is in high demand. Now, if you're going for the highest end card you can anyways, if you're going for the X80, X90, X80 Ti, whatever the branding ends up being, maybe they'll bring back the Titan branding, who knows. If you're going for that high end, I would say wait. But if you're going towards the mid-range, low end, I'd say maybe pick up one of them while there's good availability potentially and while prices are reasonable. And the second thing is, around the 4000 series, it is going to be a hotter, larger GPU because of the predominantly, I think, because of the properties of these new processes, which they're much more miniaturized than the older processes, 7 nanometers, 5 nanometer processes at TSMC. They have different characteristics. So in order to reach the maximum potential of the chip, or close to the maximum potential, like 80%, 85% of the maximum potential of the chip, for like, let's say a 600 millimeter square chip, now that just happens to mean that you need to bump up the voltage more than you did before. There's more leakage in the chip, and so you get to like 450, 500 watts instead of 300 or 350 watts. That's basically the math there. But if you have the space, if you have the power budget, it does seem like those new GPUs will be pretty impressive. If any of the leaks are in any way true, on the high end, for sure, I think it would definitely be well advised to wait for those new GPUs if you can cram them into your system to integrate them. I think that they're definitely a good pick, unless you're towards that lower end, more price sensitive end of the market, where I think these are a good deal at the moment for that segment.
All right, let's move on to the Q&A. So our first question comes from Mr. Ratchet, and it is the console showdown round 2. So which of the following was your favorite? The PS1, N64, or Saturn? And has your opinion changed since then, and why? So Tom, do you want to come in on this one?
Yeah, sure. Well, the answer is very. It's PlayStation 1. It's got to be the console that had the biggest impact on me growing up. Mega Drive was my first, and then it was just like, well, after that point, I knew a couple of people with the Saturn. In fact, one person with a Saturn, and maybe a handful with N64s. But all the energy, all the buzz, all the excitement was around Sony. The PlayStation 1's launch, Wipeout, Tekken, Parappa the Rapper, and it just, even like minor titles at the time, Destruction Derby. It just it was overwhelming how huge that console was. So it's only on hindsight when I guess you get to go back and buy these consoles, the ones that you missed, the Saturn, which I've got one over there on the Kallax there. You appreciate on hindsight, and you kind of vicariously look at these games through the eyes of people who enjoyed them growing up, to try and understand why they were so great. So my answer would be PlayStation 1 without a doubt. Final Fantasy 7, Metal Gear Solid, Resident Evil 1 and 2, there was just too much going on there. But you've got to give those other consoles their dues. Like the Saturn was incredible for 2D fighters. Street Fighter Alpha 3 is one of my favorite all-time Street Fighter games and fighting games in general. And that is it's a really good rendition on the Saturn. And the control with the 6-button layout, it's perfect for that. The N64, got to give it its dues as well. It's probably the most magical moment of my life playing games was seeing an N64 being played in a game store. Growing up, I was about 14, 13 years old. I saw Mario 64 being run on this kiosk, and it was just like voodoo, witchcraft. How are they making Mario run around, this castle in full 3D after I'd just come back from my Mega Drive where I was just running on a 2D plane. It was just mind-boggling. So all three have huge merits, and Saturn definitely fell by the wayside, I think, in America and Europe. But the answer would be PS1 for me, just because Final Fantasy VII left a huge mark on my impression of what games could be going forward in terms of production and cinematic quality, and the ability to tell a story and build huge worlds. And I think that's the direction that the industry kind of went eventually, in very different ways. But definitely PS1 is my final answer.
Well, I'm kind of aged out of this question a little bit because I was extremely young when these consoles came out. Actually, but to be fair, the N64 was my first system. I think I got it in 2000 or 2001 when I would have been 5 or 6. So that's my only real point of reference. I own a PS1 and N64 now. I don't have a Saturn. But I'd have to say, N64, just because, my earliest memories were playing Super Mario 64. I had a copy of Perfect Dark that wouldn't run because I didn't have the expansion pack.
Oh no!
I had Destruction Derby as well. I had Ocarina of Time. I had a number of games. I also had the Star Wars. Was it the Phantom Menace N64 game, or
that was the pod racing?
Maybe the pod racing one. I had a Star Wars N64 game. So that was that was definitely a special system, but it was very quickly in, for me, really the formative consoles were 6th and 7th gen in nature, which does date me a bit, but it was not really the N64. But it was my first system, so that would definitely hold the spot for me.
So for me, I actually didn't own any of these consoles. I was about the right age, but I only really had a PC, so I was playing kind of Wing Commander and stuff at this time. but I did have a friend who had a PS1, and some of my, happiest childhood memories were going to this friend's house and playing like Tekken and Twisted Metal and stuff like that. And those games still pretty much hold up. Like, the graphics are obviously very rough as, examples of, relatively early 3D games. But, they're still so fun to play. And yeah, if you haven't, played through the Twisted Metal series, especially 1 and 2, but the other ones are still pretty good, then I would highly encourage you to go back and try and find a copy. I think there's even Twisted Metal 2 got a PC release back in the day as well, so you should play it. Those are some fun games. I think, thinking back on them now, though, I think the N64 is probably kind of the most revolutionary console in some sense. Like, I feel I didn't really appreciate it at the time, but Mario 64 and kind of the many games that kind of followed in its footsteps are probably potentially some of the most influential ones. So I think, yeah, I would come down on that side of things. I feel like the Saturn is just like a mystery to me. I've never seen one in person, I don't think. I've never spent time with anyone that's played it. So I need to know. I need to fill in this missing gap in my knowledge.
It was too expensive.
And then maybe
that was really the killer. It was what, £400 at launch, which back then was ridiculous. But yeah, you had to be very into Sega and the Mega Drive to really go for that.
Yeah,
Right,
I think from a technical perspective, the N64 was definitely, in my view, that was the system to look back on and really remark on it as a pioneer in 3D graphics, because it was developed by Silicon Graphics and it was based off of a cut down version of a workstation. I think they had been working on or a work similar technology to the workstations they were working on, at least. But if you look back, you've got filtered textures, you've got perspective correction, you've got anti-aliasing, like system level anti-aliasing force and everything. And then on the controller, you got the analog stick. I think that's definitely from a technical perspective, I think it has a longer tail, a more important legacy than the Saturn, which was kind of bizarre, the PlayStation, which was a more basic system. Although the N64's compromises in terms of memory and in terms of storage were much greater, but its triumphs were, and its forward-looking aspects were also quite great. So
it was a pretty fantastic era to grow up in. I think we can all agree. Our next question is from Jesus Gonzalez, who asked, now that the most uncommon of the DF directors are here gathered, are there any new special projects or interests each of you have in your mind, want to, or are already developing for the channel? Oliver, do you want to chime in? Do you have anything that you'd love to cover that we haven't let you because you haven't been let out of the dungeon?
Yeah. Well, when I get let out of the dungeon, I don't know. I mean, there are some releases later this year that I'm looking forward to. I'm sure there are a lot of the same releases that everyone else is looking forward to. Outside of that, I have some ideas that I'll keep in my quiver for now that are maybe percolating or fermenting or rotting as you see fit in a document that I keep up to date. But yeah, definitely some ideas, but wouldn't want to spoil anything before it's ready.
Yeah, it's almost to imply that we're going to go rogue and do some wild stuff while everyone's away. But in truth, we're actually just going to carry on and doing things that make the most sense to cover, which is it is a quiet week, I will admit. And although putting together this docket for this direct, it turned out to be quite a busy one. There's a lot going on. We've joked this week we'd maybe cover My Friend Peppa Pig for PS5 and Series X, just because there's 2 modes on there. There's a performance mode and a quality mode, and for all the kids wanting to get their best from the PS5, they might want to know what's on there. So,
I think the answer to this question though is that if we have interests or projects that we want to do, I think we're generally pretty free to pursue them. Obviously, we want to make sure that the most major releases are covered. And so occasionally that means people will, cover a game that they don't personally have a huge amount of interest in. But there's always, a technical interest there. It's always interesting to see what different games are coming out, what techniques they're using, how they're making their decisions between, performance and fidelity and things like that. But, by and large, we are able to go and say, actually, I'm really interested in this game, so let's cover it. So the only thing that really kind of jumped out at me when considering this question was I think we should be doing more kind of live audience interaction kind of things. I think it would be really fun for us to do more like YouTube live streams, for example, where we're just playing multiplayer games with our, with the fans, with the people that are watching DF. So I think that would be really fun. I think that's something we could potentially explore, and I'll kind of have some thoughts about that. But otherwise, yeah, I think we're really lucky, to be honest, that we have the ability, because we're our own editors generally, to go and find out the stuff we're interested in and bring it to the channel. So the next question comes from Senkal, and they ask, how do you share your work between DF and Eurogamer? I know that not everyone does this, but is it like mostly DF and only a few articles of Eurogamer? Or is it more like some time split, let's say 70%, 30%? Or is DF just subcontracted to do work there? So this is a question we get kind of asked variations of a lot. And basically, we are both part of the same parent company, and we have an agreement that Digital Foundry's written work appears on Eurogamer. But we don't really have, we are employed, most of us, I think, by Eurogamer itself. And, our articles will go up there, but we don't have to work on Eurogamer as part of our jobs. Generally, part of my role as being a deputy editor is that I'm taking a lot of people's scripts and their assets and just translating them from the video work into a written article. Because, at the end of the day, it makes sense for our talented video team to be making videos rather than writing up articles for the website. So that kind of falls down to me. And I think that works out pretty well. How do you guys think about it? Tom, what do you think?
It has changed over the years, definitely. I mean, my title on Eurogamer is still senior staff writer, but ultimately, I'm a video editor, and that is my focus. In reality, I make the write and edit the videos for the YouTube side, and then obviously I have a script or notes that I hand now to, say, yourself, Will, or Rich, and that is then turned into an article that can be read on Eurogamer to kind of prop up the YouTube video. So yeah, it's a bit of a mix and match, and I think there's a good symbiotic relationship with the two. That means that the YouTube crowd can feed into what's going on Eurogamer, because to watch the video on especially PC benchmark stuff, you're very well off going to the Eurogamer page to see the stats and the benchmarks and the frame rates. And there's a lot of cool tools, and also there's a comparison tools on the Eurogamer page, which kind of go hand in hand with the video of like comparisons PS5, Series X. So it's very much like feeds back. There's a lot of work that it's all interlinked, and I've always seen it as Digital Foundry Eurogamer as pretty much one entity in some sense, because of that, how well that relationship works. But yeah.
So let's move on to a question from Dak. So Dak says, "Greetings, DF Skeleton Crew. Represent. I hope you've been throwing wild late-night parties and eating all of the ice cream in the freezer while Mom and Dad are away. Anywho, with Prime Day concluded, I was wondering what personal pickups you each had, if any, during the sale." So, Tom, did you pick up anything?
Well, I genuinely got a lot of use out of the article put together by, I think you must have helped with this, Will, and your hands are in the Prime deals on site. But it is the PS5 remote, a media remote for 18 quid was quite handy. Not shilling for Amazon, but it's like okay, I needed that. It's handy because I watch a lot of films. I don't just play games, and to have the battery run down on my controller is whenever I need to use it is quite handy. But otherwise, I just kind of had a browse and got some 4K Blu-rays. Yeah, it's nothing too gamey. I've kind of got the bases covered there, but yeah, definitely into my films right now.
Oh, nice one. Oliver, what about you? Did you pick up anything?
Yeah, I got a cheap projector because I have a perfectly
cool.
white wall
really?
behind me. So I
Looks
wanted.
pretty blue to me, mate.
Oh yeah, I've got some stupid color lighting thing, but I thought it might be fun to play with the projector and just project something cool on my wall, maybe for video calls or other things, and or maybe watch something on it. I don't know. I could put like something huge just because I have it. So I thought it'd be fun. I got like a 50% discount on a cheap projector.
That's fun.
But outside of that, I don't really do sales too much. I just buy stuff when the mood strikes, I suppose. So
Yeah. No, that's fair enough. For my part, I picked up some shampoo and conditioner. So something entirely tech unrelated, just because it's the sort of thing that I don't normally look at. Generally during the rest of the year, there are sales, there are, price drops on things. So if I needed like a new hard drive or an SSD or something, then I probably would have already picked it up by this stage. But it was a pretty decent sale in terms of, getting stuff for lowest ever prices on some occasions. So hopefully, y'all watching, use the articles and bought stuff using our affiliate links, because it is an important source of income for the channel. And if you're annoyed by the Digital Foundry Twitter publishing my deals articles, I am really sorry about that. I know not everyone is needs that or is into that, but it is a source of revenue for us. So it is something that unfortunately you'll have to deal with. I do try and make it as easy as possible for people to opt out of that stuff. A lot of the deals will have like a hashtag deal at the end of them. So if you mute that word in Twitter, for example, then that wouldn't bother you anymore.
Yeah.
So
it's a good shout.
Yeah. So the next question is from Leftist Hominid, a long-time listener and question submitter for the DF channel. And they say, streaming is banned in John's household and consoles outside of work are banned in Alex's household. I don't think this is maybe necessarily entirely true. I don't think we have strict bans on these things, but obviously, What gaming-related things are banned in everyone else's? So Oliver, do you have anything that's banned in terms of gaming?
Oh, I have lots. No, I don't play free to play. Completely
Nice.
down on free to play. I've played Fortnite a couple times. I mean, maybe I might play a competitive shooter if people are playing it that I play with frequently.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I hate free to play stuff, and I hate streaming. I hate mobile games. No, I mean they're okay. There's always exceptions to these things, but in general, I'm not a huge fan of streaming. Not a huge fan of mobile games. Except, there are some good ones, but it seems like the business models that predominate in mobile, which are free-to-play business models, tend to kind of sour me on the whole enterprise. There's some good stuff on like Apple Arcade, but it's few and far between in my view. So yeah, I like home consoles. I like PCs. I like paying $90 for a game up here in Canada. That's more my speed for sure.
Fair enough. Tom, what do you think? Anything banned?
I think MMOs, for a slew of reasons, which would, I don't need to spell them out. I miss out on Final Fantasy 14, I think, because I have a suspicion I'd potentially enjoy that game. Because there's so many good reviews and lots of people love it. It's just that it is a time sink as well, that I know I have to course correct myself on, that sort of thing. When there's a game that I know I'll just be really into, I've got to tell myself, all right, I could spend that time doing this other thing, which I'll get value out of. But Final Fantasy 14 is, MMOs in general are the things that I kind of push to the side. A self-inflicted ban for my own preservation, really. But I know they're great.
Yeah. I think it's pretty similar on my end. I know that there's games, like games as a service kind of games, where if I try and keep up with like the weekly challenges or whatever, that I will just spend all of my time playing them.
Yeah.
Like, not the most recent Call of Duty, not Vanguard, but the one before that, I spent so long getting every weapon, like the most shiny it could be. And that was really fun. But there was a lot of hours where I was just thinking, oh, I hate this. Why am I doing this? But I was still doing it. So, I'm trying to be more strict with myself and saying I need to play more single player games and games where I'm actually enjoying myself. And if the game isn't ready yet because it's not patched sufficiently, then I have a bit in my Steam that says when it's released, play it. Like Baldur's Gate 3, for example, I'm really looking forward to that, but I've kind of put a ban on myself of playing games before they're properly released, because I just want to experience them, in full glory when they're ready, and then I don't want to, spend my time with them otherwise. So I think that's about it for me. All right, the final question, and it's an important one. This could have galactic consequences. It's from King Penumbra, who says, if Alex Battaglia from 2026 came through a time warp and told you that the Steam Deck 2 had more capable ray tracing hardware than the PS5 and Series X, but had no way of showing proof, then went back to his own time, would you believe him? Oliver, what do you think?
So I thought about this. It's a good question. I would, well, first of all, if Alex is saying it, I would believe it. That note aside, let's say that I didn't have a good reason to trust Alex, or maybe Alex has been distrustful in the intervening years. So Alex says this to me. I actually would believe it, because if you think about it, RDNA 3, RDNA 4, that could basically be the cycle through 2024. Presuming there's a new GPU launch, new architectures. What we know of RDNA 3, which is only through leaks and rumors of maybe not great veracity, but we do think that it will have better RT performance per CU and better RT performance per teraflop of compute. We think that there's going to be some optimizations. I mean, I think all the rumors are suggesting, and I think it's pretty obvious that AMD would want to improve in that area as well. Maybe, who knows, a significant fraction faster, at least on a per teraflop basis in terms of RT performance. Let's presume that's the same also for RDNA 4, which, I'm sure they'll continue to make improvements. And then also consider the fact that it's on a new architecture. In general, it should be on a much lower process node size. It should be much denser. I think it's definitely conceivable if you were to think that maybe it could be roughly maybe 2 times as efficient at generating rays per teraflop if you took that assumption based on a future AMD architecture. Also assume that it was a much more dense and much more capable processor in terms of rasterization performance, and in terms of teraflops. I think it might be in that ballpark if AMD continues to go with this sort of like add-on modified shader core approach to RT. Who knows where they'll be at by that point? But I think it definitely could be the case. Long story short,
4 years is a long time in game hardware development, and they are, I don't know, you have to still cram, even with an architecture revision to RDNA 3 or like a variation of it, you'd have to have it capable on a very limited the CPU in there, and also the battery life would have to hold up, so they would still be throttling on the core clocks, memory clocks. So there is, on the one hand, what's potentially feasible, and then there's what's possible with the battery tech of 2026, which I'm not sure it will have evolved so radically by then. So I'm not sure. But if Alex is convinced, future Alex comes back with a big smile on his face, and there's joy in his eyes that portable PC gaming has finally come to fruition with ray tracing, I'll believe him. I believe that, man.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think it would definitely be contingent on much more efficient RT in AMD architectures. That would be the thing for me. Like, I don't think they'll be anywhere close in terms of raster performance. Definitely not. But if AMD really pushes the boat out, if NVIDIA really pushes the boat out, if there's a bit of an arms race in terms of generating really efficient RT, it could be possible. I'm not saying it'll happen, but if there is a massive drive up in the efficiency of AMD's RT implementation, I think it could happen potentially.
Yeah, I mean, it's all down to demand, isn't it? I mean, if there's a lot of games that are coming out over the next 4 years that are super heavy in RT, and that starts to become a real differentiating factor in the hardware, then, AMD conceivably could move in that direction to such an extent that it would work. I mean, we have to remember that in RDNA 2, it's their first attempt at doing RT, on a hardware level. So there are always big gains to be found in the second generation. I think we saw a massive shift in efficiency, certainly between NVIDIA's first and second, RT core. So I think we could see something similar. And if 4 years is enough to get 2 generations in there, I think, this Alex from the future might have a point. Okay, so I think that just about does it. That is week 28 wrapped up. That is episode 70 of DF Direct wrapped up. Thank you so much to Oliver and to Tom for joining me on this exciting episode of The Skeleton Crew Does DF Direct. It was wonderful to have you all watching and listening at home. And yeah, as always, you need to click bells, you need to subscribe, you need to send us lots of money in unmarked envelopes. I don't know how these outros do. Tom, can you do the outro?
Absolutely. If you want to see more of this thing, you can check out our Patreon. Feel free to like and subscribe on the YouTube channels. All that just helps encourage us to make the kind of content you want to see, because the more you like one thing, the more we'll know. I think that kind of wraps it up. Thanks again for hosting, Will. You did a fantastic job.
No worries. That was an interesting moment for me, but I think everything is not on fire, so we did a good job.
Yeah,
so cheers,
just
guys.
checking.
All right, bye.